let's get into this. So tell me a little bit about, I think one of the things that I'm really interested in of the story that you and I spoke about before as we open up this interview is you went to seminary. Like I'm always intrigued by men that go to seminary. And then of course they're married and they have life outside of that aspect. So tell me a little bit about when did you know that that's something that you wanted to do?
Oh boy, that is a loaded question with a lot of interest behind it, Josh. So I came from a business family. My dad was the CEO of a company in New York, and I really came to faith in a genuine way. I kind of had a few experiences with God in high school, but then in college, I played some football and I was in a fraternity. And believe it or not, at a grain alcohol fraternity party, I basically saw that there was darkness in the world, and the darkness was me too. And so that really started my spiritual journey. And then you come to a point where a lot of people who are in their teens and 20s and 30s know this, where you suddenly have to make decisions that impact the whole rest of your life. They really are big decisions, and you haven't had much guidance to it. But going to an Ivy League school and being involved in the things I was really hungry once I came to know Jesus, started leading a Bible study, got involved with Athletes in Action. I was really hungry to grow spiritually. And so my pastor had gone to seminary and heard about Dallas Theological Seminary, and it was so different from Cornell that I think I just felt like I gotta try something different. I've got to go there. I didn't know if I'd want to be a pastor or not, but I knew I wanted to get to know God.
Mm-hmm. So you were also a football player.
Yes.
And so did you have any aspirations to follow that dream farther than college? I mean,
of course I did, Josh, but and then there was reality, So I mean, Cornell isn't USC or anything, but I grew up all my brothers played football. I played football. And so I started to know I didn't want to do what my dad did, but really, a lot of the heroes, I mean, I literally have a picture on my desk of my high school football coach. And so, football and sports just really had a huge impact on me.
Yeah, that's awesome. You went on further to, after college, you started a church in Boston. You actually went to that degree of it after seminary, and you worked at Willow Creek as well too. I think it was Willow Creek. Was it Willow Creek first? Yeah. And then you opened up a church in Boston?
Yes. Yeah. So having grown up in the Northeast, grew up outside of New York City, my dad was from Boston, and having come to faith in an Ivy League school, there was the desire to say, hey, how do we bring authentic faith, authentic Jesus into that world? When so many people reject religion, I think for a lot of good reasons. I mean, I think if my experience of Christianity was what a lot of people's was, I would reject it. So my wife and I both had a passion around bringing God into an Ivy League type of world. And Boston, I mean, it's got Harvard and MIT and Boston College and, you name it. So yeah, for the 90s, in 1991, we moved there and started Beacon Community Church.
Yeah, I love the history, because really, I mean, at present day now, one of the things that you're doing, I mean, your main thing that you're doing now is you're training coaches, you're training leaders to how they can lead other people. And I really wanted to set that foundation of the fact that you were, for the longest time in your life, you were trying to lead yourself. You're trying to find your spiritual path. And I think it's really awesome and an indicative of the success that you've seen and why you're so passionate about this the state of where you're at right now in your life. Tell us a little bit about that. Tell us a little bit about your company now. We train coaches. A little bit what's the inspiration behind that? How did you see why did you see a need, or when did you see a need for this in our world?
Yeah, well, the reason I went into pastoring was I wanted to help people grow. I wanted to help people change. I think most people who go into ministry have that as a certain passion and desire. Most people don't go into it for the fame or the money, right? So along the way, the more I was leading the church, the further away I got from the actual transformation of working directly with people. And I started to see that the reason that I went into pastoring in the first place was I wanted to help people become who God had invited them to be.
Mhm.
One of my favorite scriptures now that I never would have noticed had I not gone through my own pain was Ephesians 2:10, where it says that we are God's workmanship created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God planned in advance for us to do. And what I've
Mhm.
come to see is most people don't know what that is. And
Yeah.
and they don't have people in their lives who help unlock that inside of them. And I, as a pastor, felt like I still didn't know who I really was and what I really was called to do. And that's a hard place to be when you're leading a church and you're leading others and you're feeling like, am I being the real me?
Yeah.
When I share my story, do I have to edit it, or can I just go, hey, this is the real me?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you opened up with me the last time, and I hope you're okay with me asking this and having you share this, is, I mean, you got to a point where you just had burnout. When you're not living in your purpose, when you're not chasing what you know that you've been meant to do and created to do, you're in constant conflict, right? And you just talked about that, but you got to a point where it was literally burnout that you felt, and you needed a career change.
Yeah. Yeah, I think of it almost like having like dirty energy and clean energy. I think
Mhm.
what leads to burnout is we're not operating in clean energy. We're editing ourselves. We're living somewhat of a false life. And so, as Pastor Jeff and a lot of things I was doing and things I was teaching and saying, I felt like I'd come away tired, because I felt like I was constantly needing to edit myself. And when your body starts to feel that, your body feels the tension of it, versus when you're just living authentic, energy flows real you. And what happened was, over time, I kept saying things that I didn't really believe,
Mhm.
and I kept trying to act as ways that weren't really me, and it was energy draining.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was the guy who would yell at his kids and yell at his wife and show up and preach about love.
Yeah.
And it just feels like this can't be good you know
Yeah. So now that you are training coaches, obviously, especially in today's world right now, there's just so many things that are hitting us constantly. And as leaders, we're getting bombarded all the time by not only social media, by the news, by the things that are changing, the challenges that we're facing that some can control, but most of the stuff we can't control. I'd love to know, like, what is your perspective? Like, what are you seeing as the biggest challenge that leaders, the people that you're coaching, the people that you're able to impact and influence, what do you see that they're having challenges trying to overcome?
yeah. Yeah, I think two things come to mind. Is one is the burnout that you're talking about. I think a lot of leaders are fatigued, they're tired, and they don't quite know where they can share that authentically. And complaining doesn't work. Um, being anxious doesn't work. So I think, number one, I think a lot of leaders are feeling tired because they don't have some of the things that I'm wanting to help coaching bring. The second thing is, I think, the reality is willpower and white knuckling it doesn't work for most of us.
Mm.
If it did, we wouldn't need Alcoholics Anonymous or
Yeah.
ways to overcome addiction. So I think a lot of times leaders feel like they need to just try harder. And it's kind of, why a lot of New Year's resolutions don't work, is because willpower alone doesn't work. And
Mhm.
so that's where I believe that what we can do in coaching is help create a new environment so that people can actually make progress. Because when leaders aren't making progress, they feel stuck, they feel discouraged, they feel like, why am I even doing this? I went into this to change lives and it's not working.
Yeah. How long of a process does that typically take, do you think? I mean, we're training people. Of course, we're trying to coach our internal leadership as much as we possibly can. And James, my right-hand man, is, him and I have constant conversations about this, right? About like, well, how much grace do you give? And how long does this last? And how long do you want, and how many second chances do you give? And, I have my certain take on it, but I just love to know on your end, like when you have a leader come to you, and let's just say they've been coaching with you for 6 months and they're still stuck doing the same stuff. Like, how does that next step happen? What does that look like for them to really overcome that big obstacle in their life so that they can get on the other side of that mountain and see all the other mountains that they need to tackle?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm reminded of a story that I heard when I just started coaching. I've been coaching for 20 years. This was maybe about 18 or 19 years ago. I went to hear great speaker, teacher named Matthew Kelly.
Oh yeah.
And Matthew was teaching at a big church up in the north of Chicago. And he's a great communicator. Said, "Hey, how many people think people like change?" He goes, "Raise your hand if you think people like change." How many people do you think raised their hand?
Yeah. 0.
One.
Oh,
It
no
was
way.
Matthew Kelly. It
Oh,
wasn't me. It was Matthew Kelly. Matthew said, "I believe people like change. I believe they want the better career. They want a better marriage. They want to lose weight. They want to be, make more money." He goes, "The problem is this thing called transition."
mm,
He goes, and a lot of people, won't budge with transition because they're afraid of it. And so I see this change process as entering into transition.
mm,
And I coach people, for a minimum of 6 months, because I believe that it takes time to really change. But
yeah.
there's some things that can short the process. We all want to short the process. We don't want to like, hey, when I'm 95, I'll finally arrive.
Yeah.
I don't believe it needs to be that. It doesn't need to take that long. In fact, I mean, how many people do you know, Josh, who'll say, "Hey, I want to find my career, so I'm going to take like 5 years off," or, take, and I'm like, well, that's awesome, but it doesn't need to take that long.
Yeah.
And
That's
so
called retirement. That when you take 5 years off, like
yeah,
that.
hopefully it's more than 5 years. But that's where I believe that coaches and guides come in who can help you short the process. And one of the things Jesus was a master at was not just telling people what to do. He certainly taught,
Mhm.
but he asked great questions. He drew people out, and he would invariably turn it around. And instead of telling somebody what to do, he would ask them a question. And
Mhm.
Jonas Salk, the guy who invented the polio vaccine, said, what most people think of as the moment of discovery is really the discovery of the question.
Mhm.
So I kind of think that there comes a time in a lot of people's lives, and maybe someone's listening, and they're going, "Hey, all right, I'm ready to change. I'm ready for the new career. I'm ready to grow my leadership," and they're asking how. And that's where I think sometimes the right question is really who.
Mhm.
Who knows how to do this?
Yeah.
Who can be my guide? Who's the right coach? Who's the right counselor? And when you have the right coach or have the right counselor, I don't think it needs to take a decade.
Yeah.
It's not like you just take this pill and call me in the morning, but there is a sense in which the right guide, the right coach, the right, mentor even can help you short the process.
Yeah. One of the things that I've found, because I think that was one of the biggest moments and opportunities and game changers that I experienced in my growth when I did hire a coach, hire a mentor, is the fact that now it became a lifelong journey. Like I know that I had a transition for about almost 2 years there where I was searching for that next mentor, right? I needed the
Mhm.
next one. There are times sometimes where you do outgrow that coach, right? And that's great because that means that you have grown, you have committed to the change that you wanted to. And but I know that I felt lost. And I know that as much as I could do it on my own because of my own internal strength, I wasn't making nearly the momentum and nearly the change that I could when I had somebody that was sitting at my table that was coaching me or mentoring me. And I can't say enough about what you're doing. I think it's awesome. I'm curious to know, are you a lot like other coaches where sometimes you just don't feel adequate? Like you're just like, man, this is a tremendous amount of responsibility. I'm helping walk with somebody as they're making, changes in their lives and greater impact in their lives. And it's like, sometimes we have that, imposter syndrome that we go through. I'm just curious for you, did you ever have that at the beginning? Because this is this, you were in coaching, you left that for a while, and then you got back into coaching to establish the We Train Coaches program. Did you have any of that imposter syndrome at all during that process?
Yeah, I mean, if we waited until we were perfect, we certainly would never coach anybody else. So number one, I mean, if you're waiting to be perfect, certainly it doesn't happen. I mean, before coaching sessions, I mean, I coach some very impressive people, and
Mhm.
I will show up and I'll just open my Bible or open my hands and go, God, I need you, be with
Yeah.
me. And one of the key things about coaching is, your presence is your greatest present. And so, like, if I show up to perform and impress the people I'm coaching, that's not great coaching.
Yeah.
I need to show up, all in, all me. But I do feel like I was working with a coach, and I work with a coach. I work with a counselor. I have worked with a spiritual director. I tell my wife sometimes, for me, it takes a village,
Yeah.
because I know my brokenness. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm the pastor who, one time picked up his 12-pound concordance and whipped it across the room and broke the wall and broke the concordance. And I mean, I was one of those people, you think you have a problem, so I get that. But I also have realized that coaching has changed my life. And I mean, I know I'm not the coach I'm a lot better than the coach I was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But I truly believe, and the reason I started We Train Coaches is because I believe that a great coach who's adequately equipped and has some natural coaching abilities can coach at any level. And so I wrote a book that's part of the coaching curriculum called The 8 Coaching Habits.
Mhm.
And when you learn how to coach and you learn how to ask really curious questions, you get to where you can coach anyone. And coaching can be learned, and more is caught than taught. So part of our program is really to mentor coaches so that they experience their own coaching that they then can learn and bring to somebody else. So yes, I still experience, the imposter syndrome. No, it's not as bad as it was,
Yeah.
but I do feel like, growing as a coach is really valuable. And
Yeah.
so, I feel like the best coaching place is We Train Coaches, but I am partial to it.
No. Well, I think you've got an amazing issue because nobody coaches the coach, right? And oftentimes what ends up happening is that these people go out there, say that they're a coach, but they're not even being mentored themselves. So I really feel, I love that you started to talk a little bit more about the We Train Coaches program that you have developed, because I know that there's a lot of people out there. They have that burden on their heart, right? They know that they were meant to lead in some fashion. They know that they were meant to impact and influence people in some way, but they just don't know how. Tell us a little bit more, if you don't mind, about your program. I think you said it was about a 6-month program. Like, tell me, like, what is it? Is it a lot of
Yeah.
one-on-one? Is it group coaching? Like, give us a kind of
Yeah.
an
Yeah. I mean,
oversight.
so I created the program starting 5 years ago that I wished I'd had. I actually had the blessing of going through, the guy who founded coaching, executive coaching, life coaching, was Thomas Leonard.
Okay.
Started Coach U back in the 1990s. Amazing coach. I mean, I'd watch him and it was like watching a great baseball player, a great dancer, great
Yeah.
football player.
Yeah.
But he was amazing. But I realized as a coach, I wished I'd had some other things. And so there's 5 key pillars that we've put into We Train Coaches. And can I share what those are?
Yes, please do.
All right.
Yes.
So number one,
I'm excited to know this, man. So yeah, I'm going to be taking notes here.
yeah. So number one, it's a spiritual formation foundation. I believe that the formation of the coach and their spiritual growth and their confidence and their being able to show up is vital. And so, coming as a pastor, I really believe that it starts with the formation of the coach, just in the same way as the formation of the leader. And
Yeah.
so there's a lot that we do that connects to the habits and disciplines of the coach. The second thing is a mentor-coach relationship, where it's a very one-on-one, you meet every 2 weeks with your coach, where they coach you and they coach you in your growth and what you're involved with in your relationships and your vision. And you do role play. And just so you're going through the process and you're learning with your coach and you're evaluating, so you're learning by being coached. The third is then we have a coaching community and a cohort that meets every 2 weeks, where you meet with your cohort and there's topics. And sometimes it's just what we call coach the coach sessions, where, I'll coach somebody and then we'll evaluate and then I'll invite somebody else to coach. So we're constantly pushing the edge of growing as coaches and bringing the topics to bear. The fourth pillar is a coaching curriculum that was actually, it started out as one book that I wrote, but it turned into 3 that are only available to people in We Train Coaches. And the first one's just called Transformational Coaching. The second is the 8 Coaching Habits. The third is the Thriving Coach. So you work through these books, but you then process them with your coach and with your community. And then the fifth is coaching tools. Like, as any builder knows, the better the tools that you have, the better you're able to, build a great house.
Yeah.
So, I'm constantly collecting them and creating them. So, there's all the access to the coaching tools as well.
No, I love it. For all those that cannot see this, I really was writing all of those steps down. I think it's actually unbelievably brilliant. One of the things, and you kind of, you talked about this, about your books. I have so much admiration for people that write books. I had the pleasure to have a time in my life where I was able to do that. And I know the painstaking moments and the process and the rewriting and this sucks. This is a bad book, and rewriting that. And you've done this multiple times. I'm just curious, the first book, did you ever, first of all, how was the process for you the first time? Like, tell me about, like, at the end of it, what was that like after the first book?
Yeah. I mean, this is one of those things that you and I know nothing about, but we can, try to gain. It's like giving birth,
Yeah.
It's like, all right, this is uncomfortable. And, what I saw my wife go through 3 times, it doesn't always look pretty, but the things that come out are worth it. And what I've learned, Josh, is that, I've got to write what I really care about. And I once heard someone say, when you write, you've got to almost like crack a vein and bleed on paper. It's got to come out of your authentic you. But I wrote a book a few years ago, called The Habits of Hope.
Right.
And I wrote it, and it was, really my story of how God transformed me and brought me back to hope. And it actually takes place in a literal physical place in the Adirondack Mountains called Hope. And I would write the book, and I would literally sometimes weep on paper. And then I'd read chapters to people, and I'd just weep, and they'd be like, oh my gosh, when's this coming out? And it took me 8 years. And finally, after 8 years, I thought, you know what, if I ever die, I want my wife to publish this. And so I need to tell her where it is on my computer. And I thought, that is really stupid. Like, if you're waiting to die to get this out there. So I literally hired my own coach, and I hired him in January. And by March, I had finished the book, found a way to publish it. And, I realized I needed my own coach, and he didn't do much beside help me stay accountable, help me, really kind of get what's on my mind. In fact, have you ever heard of the American Society of Training Development's statistics on accountability?
Heck no.
Yeah. They're crazy, right?
No.
American Society of Training and Development. But this is crazy. You can look it up on Google. So, like, if you write down a goal, you're 47% more likely to achieve it. Okay. If
Okay.
you confide in another person, it goes up to 65%. If you meet regularly for accountability with somebody else, what do you think the statistic is? How likely are you to achieve it?
90%.
95.
Wow.
95%. I mean, so how did they get those statistics? I don't know, but it's on the internet. Maybe Abraham Lincoln or Einstein said it, but I do think there's just a powerful value in writing. I do think that there's a need for a community, whether it's a writers group. I found that having a coach made all the difference, and I like writing, but there's something about a book that really does feel like giving birth, if a guy can know what that means.
Yeah, I'm so glad that I'm not the only one that felt that way, because it was a process. Now, after you've done this a number of times, what is it like for you now? Is it a lot easier? Is it like, hey, listen, I've got my flow. I know exactly what I need to do. The process is not painful anymore. Like, tell me what the
Yeah.
last books look like.
Yeah, another concept that I learned, I won't use the word that it says exactly, but you need to be willing to write crappy first drafts. Right. You probably heard it said a different way.
Yeah.
I think that the whole concept of, if you try to write a bestseller and you're writing on page, you're not going to write great stuff. But if you write what's real and you're okay to throw it out. I have thrown out thousands and thousands of pages, or they exist somewhere on some computer that, is in some computer shop somewhere in a garbage. Right.
Yeah.
But writing, I think, is an amazing, if anyone's listening and they're going, all right, I want to write, number one, I do think like you have something to say. Often people think, well, what can I say about this? And you see something in a very distinct way. You've got a unique perspective.
Yeah.
And so writing is a ministry. Writing can change someone's life. I mean, good books have been transformational for me.
Yeah.
But as my wife said a few years ago, there's a difference between the transformation of information and transformation. And so, there's transformational books, and then there's informational books. And, a lot of informational books, the ones that we love, are transformational.
Yeah, that's
Hopefully
awesome.
somebody
I
thinks
love
my
that.
books are.
Man, I tell you what, buddy, I am taking so many great notes right now, and I'm going to have to review this again to get some of those one-liners as well too. So I appreciate you throwing those in there as we've been going. As the audience that we have, they're young entrepreneurs, not necessarily young in life, but they're young entrepreneurs, or they're in that grind of stuff, right? And they're trying to reach that next mountain. And then, of course, once they reach that peak, then they understand that there's an entire mountain range of other mountains that they're going to need to climb. One of the things that I love, one of the messages that you resound with so much, and I know that you proclaim, is that you really can change. I'd love for you to just talk to our people about that, because like you said, and we've talked about this a little bit already, is that, change is really hard. Change is difficult, especially if it's not the change that we're ready for at that time. But, we just went through a really challenging time in our company just this last week. And we were forced changed. We were forced to accept change, and it's okay. Like, we are going to thrive from that, but only because we have this understanding and this mindset. And we know, like, we've had to do this before. You really can change. And I love this theme. Would you speak a little bit into that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Romans 12:2 talks about, that we are to be transformed by the renewing of our mind. Then we'll be able to test and approve what God's will is. Sometimes we want the fruit of it, but it really does start inside our own minds. And so, working on and being intentional to grow our mind, grow our mindset, has to be a leader's first and foremost. You connect with God, which is about your own transformation. And so I'm just such a big believer in developing your habits of your change. And so, you've heard the speed of the leader, the speed of the team.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's dangerous, right? Or
Yeah.
sometimes we're such slackers that we're influencing our team. So as an entrepreneur, you are your most important product, whether you're building a product or you're in the service industry. And so, like, you need to know, what do you need to do to transform your mind? And so, like, one of the first things I always do as a coach is help someone get a picture of their best them. Get clear on who are you when you are really you, then get clear on where you are now,
Mm.
and then start knowing, okay, what needs to be in place to move from here to there.
Yeah.
And because I believe that willpower doesn't work, I believe that you've got to know, how do we create the environment for change? Who do we need around us? What are the habits of that? I mean, Josh, I just lost 35 pounds as of yesterday. Okay, celebrated
Right.
with my coach.
Congratulations.
But I have never, I mean, I played football. I think I weighed 190 or 195. Okay.
Uh-huh.
I got up at one point, I was 260, but I
Wow.
was always in 230s, and I'd lose about 5 and I go back. I'd lose 10, I'd go back. I've never been able to lose that much weight. And what I realized is I needed a program, a process, a coach. And so I joined this program. I felt a little like, all right, am I embarrassed that I need a program? And I think great leaders know they need environments.
Yeah.
They need to be around other leaders. They need the retreats that you do. They need the coaching that you do. And so, I've just become such a big fan of, hey, first know what the change is that you really want, but then how do you create the environment or join the environment, because you're worth it and because the change is valuable.
Yeah, that's awesome. Jeff, I love what you're doing. I love where your heart's at with this as well too, because I think, as I look at these 5 core foundations that you teach on, I love that you start with the spiritual formation. It is so absolutely important. We talk about the 5 foundational pieces a lot in the organization and man-made that we have, even in our leadership in general. And it always starts with faith. And I can't tell you that that is the absolute root of it. If that foundation is not built, if that formation has not been nurtured, it's tough to be a really great and impactful leader for good. And
Yeah.
so how do people find out a little bit more about you? Where do they go? I know you have an assessment as well too that people can take. That's a
Yeah.
free assessment that shows them a little bit about their leadership.
Yeah. So we actually have an easy website to remember. It's wetraincoaches.com. So,
Okay.
like, you say, what do you do? Well, we train
Yeah.
coaches, but it's the whole sentence is, we train coaches who transform lives. And
Mm.
so, we're working with individuals, and, we're developing things for companies and organizations that want to bring coaching into their organization. But sometimes, someone's listening to this and they're going, is coaching for me? Like, might this coaching thing be for me either in my leadership, or, might I add coaching to my life or become a professional? And so if you go to wetraincoaches.com, there's a link there to something that's called the Is Coaching for Me assessment. It's a free assessment. And then the other thing that we're just putting up now is a 10-day thing called 10 Days to Grow Your Confidence,
Mm.
which is like a 10-day video series that I taught. And I think confidence is just critical to anything. And so people might go, well, how do I grow that? And
Yeah.
so it's another free tool that we've got there. So it's right on the website. And but love to connect with people who have a heart for coaching. I've said, I believe coaches are today's new spiritual leaders,
Mm.
and not the only spiritual leaders. Clearly, there's others, but coaches can work with people in professional sports. They can work with people in politics. They can work with people in career transition. And I believe they need to be trained spiritually to do that. And so that's just, really what my own passion is, to see that happen.
I love it, man. I so appreciate your time. This has been so much fun. Once again, I got a ton of notes here and I can't wait to listen to it again so I can write down those one-liners and use them and duplicate them in my life. And I'm going to go take your assessment, man. I'd love to see this. I'd like firsthand experience there. And of course, we can all build more confidence. So you better believe I'll be downloading that as well too. So any
Awesome.
last parting words for our audience? Anything you'd like to just leave them with as we end our podcast today?
Yeah, I mean, something I ask the question sometime to somebody, hey, if you had 1 million people that you were to give a message to, what would you tell them? And what I say is, hey, you've got something that God has put in you that is really significant. And if you don't step out and use it, all of us lose, and you lose, and your family loses. And so, bring what you've got into the world. And sure, there's going to be so many people and challenges, but persevere, because what you have is what the rest of us need.
Love it. Amen to that. That is awesome. Jeff, my man, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be with us, to be with our audience. And I know that you just made a fantastic impact.
Great, Josh. Well, it's great to be with you. Thanks for all you do.
Yeah. All right, you guys. Hey, you guys know we don't ask for much, but what we do ask is that you pay the price of admission. And what you do, you just support this. You get this into the hands of those that need it, that want to hear it, that need to listen to this message that Jeff brought to you today. And as always, we love you, we appreciate you, and we most certainly will be seeing you on the next episode.